They say every school has its shadows. At Wellington High, those shadows had names, and they ruled the halls with fear. The bell rang loud and shrill as the doors of room 12 creaked open. The chatter of students echoed down the hallway, bouncing off lockers and polished floors. Amidst the noise, a figure stood calmly at the front of the classroom, holding nothing but a slim leather bag and a quiet smile. Mr. Ezra Thorne. He didn't look like much, tall, lean, wearing a slightly crumpled button-down shirt, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. But what struck everyone wasn't how he looked. It was how still he was. He didn't fidget, didn't speak, didn't try to impress. He just watched. The students poured in, whispering, nudging one another. Everyone had heard the rumors. "New sub," someone said. "Probably won't last a week," said another. "He looks like he reads poetry to trees," a voice mocked, laughing, and then came the Trinity. 3 seniors who weren't just students, they were forces of nature. Logan, tall, athletic, captain of the basketball team, and son of the school board's president. Mason, quiet but deadly, always recording people on his phone and turning their pain into viral clips. And Eliza, charming on the outside, venomous within. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her whispers were powerful enough to destroy reputations. They strolled in like royalty, backpacks swinging, chewing gum and grinning like they owned the place. "This the new guy?" Logan smirked, dropping into his seat and propping his feet on the desk. "Looks like a librarian," Eliza chimed in, pulling out her phone and snapping a photo. "Bet he cries if we raise our voices," Mason muttered, already typing something on his screen. Mr. Thorne didn't move. He didn't flinch. Instead, he picked up a piece of chalk and wrote just 2 words on the board. "Why pain?" Then he turned around, looking at each student carefully as if memorizing their faces. The room quieted just a little. "I'm not here to give you grades," he said, his voice even, smooth. "I'm here to ask you questions you're too afraid to answer." For a moment, there was silence. And then, like clockwork, the first paper plane flew through the air and bounced off his shoulder. The room burst into laughter, but Thorne only smiled. Logan leaned back. "Oh, this is going to be fun." For the next 3 days, they tried everything. Day 1. Mason secretly filmed Ezra eating lunch alone in the teacher's lounge, adding sad violin music and posting it online. "Lonely Teacher Syndrome," the caption read. It racked up 12K views. Day 2. Logan stole the class roster and signed Mr. Thorne up for dozens of email subscriptions. Everything from how to survive a breakup to weekly cat facts. Day 3. Eliza organized a flash mob prank during class. Suddenly, 18 students started barking like dogs in the middle of a poetry reading. Ezra calmly paused and waited for them to finish. The more they pushed, the more he didn't react. And that drove them crazy. "He's not even human," Logan spat after school. "No one is that calm." "He's either a robot or hiding something," Mason added, eyes glinting. "Maybe he's a creep." Eliza bit her lip, thoughtful. "Everyone has a breaking point. We just haven't found his yet." They planned something big, something unforgettable. Friday. A day no one at Wellington High would forget. It started with a rumor, planted by Mason, that Ezra had been fired from his last job for hitting a student. Photoshopped documents and emails began circulating. The students started whispering. Even the other teachers gave Thorne sideways glances. Second, Logan hacked the projector and streamed a fake video onto the screen during Thorne's class. A clip showing Ezra yelling at someone violently, his voice distorted but unmistakable. The class gasped. Ezra simply turned the projector off. Third, Eliza slipped into the principal's office during lunch and planted a fake resignation letter in Thorne's file. The goal was simple: get him fired before the day was over, and just before the final bell, they struck the last blow. Logan stood up mid-class and shouted, "I'm done pretending, Mr. Thorne. We know who you really are." The class fell dead silent. Mason was filming. Eliza was smirking. Every student turned their eyes to the front. Ezra paused, laid his book down, and looked at the three of them. Then, for the first time, he walked away from the board, down the aisle, and stood in front of Logan, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to matter. "You think you've broken me?" Ezra asked, voice still calm. "No," Logan sneered. "I know we did." And then something changed. Ezra reached into his leather bag and pulled out 3 small envelopes, each labeled with a name: Logan.Mason.Eliza. He handed them out wordlessly. "Open them." Logan snatched his, ripped it open, and froze. Mason read his silently, and his smirk fell away. Eliza stared at hers as if it were a ghost. Inside each was a photo of them. Not taken at school, not from social media, but deeply personal. Logan, 6 years old, crying in a hospital hallway after his mother's cancer diagnosis. Mason, hiding under his bed at 10, bruised and terrified after one of his father's violent outbursts. Eliza, sitting alone at a foster care agency, clutching a stuffed rabbit, looking around at empty chairs, and beneath each photo, a note. "I see the pain you're hiding, but hurting. Others won't heal it." The classroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the ceiling fan. Logan blinked, furious. "Where did you get these?" "I was a trauma counselor for 10 years before I started teaching," Ezra said softly. "I worked with children just like you. And when I took this job, I made it my mission to understand, not to punish." "You're sick," Mason whispered. "You've been spying on us." "No," Ezra interrupted. "I've been listening to the words you didn't say, the way you look around when no one thinks you're watching, the anger, the loneliness, the fear." Eliza shook her head, voice trembling. "You had no right." "I had every right," Ezra said, finally raising his voice just enough to command the room. "Because every day, I watched you tear others down to keep from crumbling yourself. And today, I'm giving you a choice. You can continue this path or you can face the truth." The bell rang. No one moved. Logan, who never backed down from anyone, turned and walked out in silence. Mason turned off his phone and slid it into his pocket, head lowered. Eliza stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Ezra turned to the rest of the class. "This isn't just about 3 students. It's about all of you. Who do you want to be in a world that's already full of pain? Another source of it? Or someone who ends the cycle?" One by one, the students filed out. Quiet, thoughtful, Eliza was the last to leave. She stopped at the door, holding the photo to her chest. "I was 7, she whispered. "No one's ever seen this before. Not even me." "I know," Ezra said gently. "But now that you've seen it, you can stop running." She nodded once and walked away. Ezra stood alone in the empty classroom, his expression unreadable. He turned to the board, picked up the chalk, and under "Why Pain," wrote a single word: choice. Pain is a teacher, too. But what you learn from it, that's up to you. The following Monday, something was different. The halls of Wellington High, usually buzzing with sarcastic remarks and muffled laughter, felt hushed, not silent, but thoughtful, like the school itself was holding its breath. Word had spread fast. What happened in room 12 wasn't just a story, it was a turning point. Everyone knew, and more than that, everyone was watching, especially the 3 who had ruled the halls. Like kings and queens, Logan didn't swagger anymore. His usual cocky grin was replaced with quiet calculation, as though he was constantly thinking, not about how to dominate a room, but how to exist in it without hurting anyone. Mason's phone, once constantly held out to film someone's embarrassment, stayed in his pocket. He hadn't uploaded anything to his channel in 3 days. A record. And Eliza? She didn't speak unless she had something real to say. Not sweetly venomous, not fake nice, just real, raw, honest. It was unsettling, to them, to everyone, but most of all, to Ezra Thorne. He hadn't expected them to break. He hadn't expected them to listen, but most of all, he hadn't expected what came next. It was Tuesday morning when he found a folded piece of paper on his desk. No name, just 3 words. Can we talk? He didn't need to ask who it was from. That lunch period, all 3 of them, Logan, Mason, Eliza, stood outside room 12, looking unsure for the first time in their lives. Ezra waved them in. They sat, not at the back like before, but at the front, eyes forward, hands still, and then Logan, prideful, sharp-tongued Logan, did something no one expected. He apologized. "I thought being feared meant being strong," he said, voice low. "But it just made me lonely." Mason spoke next. "Hurting others made me forget how hurt I was. I thought if I laughed at them, I wouldn't cry for me." Eliza looked up last, her eyes glassy. "You saw a version of me I buried a long time ago, and I hated you for it, but only because I forgot who that little girl was." Ezra didn't speak for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard where students were milling about, laughing, shouting. "Living? Do you know what I did before teaching?" he asked without turning around. "You said you were a counselor," Mason replied. "I was. In inner-city schools, group homes, juvenile centers. I met children who had seen more trauma by age 10 than most adults see in a lifetime. And the one thing I learned was this: hurt people, but they also heal people, if they choose to." He turned around slowly. "And now I'm asking you, what will you choose to be?" They didn't answer with words, they answered with action. That Friday, Ezra was surprised again, this time by the principal herself. "Mr. Thorne, you've caused quite a stir," she said, sitting across from him in the lounge. "I can imagine," Ezra replied cautiously. "Not in the way you think," she said, sliding a file across the table. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, from students, teachers, even parents. Praising Ezra for his patience, his insight, his ability to see beyond behavior and into truth. "I was planning to make your position temporary," the principal said, folding her hands. "But I'd be a fool to let you go. I'm offering you a permanent role, full-time." Ezra blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected permanence. But then again, maybe it was time to stop running too. He nodded. "I accept." And with that, room 12 wasn't just a classroom anymore. It became a haven. Over the next few weeks, the change became undeniable. Logan joined the peer mentorship program. Once feared by underclassmen, now he was tutoring them after school, patient, encouraging, sincere. Mason deleted his prank channel entirely. Instead, he started a podcast with Ezra's help, Real Talk with Mace, where he interviewed students about their struggles anonymously. It quickly became one of the most listened-to school podcasts in the district. And Eliza? She started a support group, quietly, humbly. The Quiet Room, she called it, a place where students could go during lunch if they were feeling overwhelmed. No judgment, no noise, just space. None of it erased the past, but it made the present worth something. And then, the event that would define the year arrived. Wellington's first student-led assembly on empathy. Organized by Logan, Mason, and Eliza, hosted by them too. The auditorium was packed. The 3 stood on stage, facing hundreds of their classmates, many of whom still weren't sure what to expect. And then Logan stepped forward. "You all know me," he said, his voice strong. "You knew me as the guy who could get away with anything, who laughed at pain, who called it Just jokes. But what you didn't know was that I was using your fear to cover my own." He paused, breathing in. "And I'm done with that." Mason followed, adjusting the mic. "I recorded everything because I didn't want to feel anything. Watching pain on a screen is easier than feeling it in your chest, but it's not better. It's not real. This is." Eliza stepped forward last. The room seemed to hold its breath. I called people weak when I felt weak myself. I wore kindness like a costume, not because I believed in it, but because I knew how powerful fake kindness could be. But Mr. Thorne, he saw through it. And that forced me to see myself. She looked at Ezra sitting in the front row. "Thank you." Then, together, they said the words printed across the back of every flyer, every banner, every chair in the auditorium. "We choose to heal." The room exploded in applause, not for a performance, but for a transformation. Later that evening, as Ezra was gathering his things, he found another note slipped into his briefcase. This one had no fancy words, just one line. "You changed the ending of our story. Thank you for being the beginning." No name, no signature. But he smiled anyway. Because some things, you just know. Months passed, then years. Ezra remained at Wellington High, not just as a teacher, but as a force of quiet revolution. More teachers joined his efforts. A new school-wide compassion curriculum was developed. Student referrals. Dropped by 60%, a new wing of the school was built, named the Thorne Center for Reflection and Resilience. Logan got a scholarship, not for sports, but for leadership. Mason became a youth counselor, helping kids find healthier ways to be heard. Eliza went on to study psychology, determined to give children what she once needed most, to be seen. Really? Seen? And Ezra? He never raised his voice. He never punished out of anger. He simply listened, because in the end, the greatest power doesn't come from control. It comes from compassion. And in just 60 seconds, just 1 minute of truth, he didn't. "Just silence bullies!" He sparked a movement. "We think strength is being the loudest in the room, but maybe it's being the one who listens even when the world shouts. Maybe true power isn't breaking people down, but helping them rebuild. If you're hurting, don't hide it. If you've caused hurt, don't run from it, because every story, no matter how dark, can change its ending. All it takes is a moment, one choice, one teacher, one truth. Fade out."